world title in everyone's imagination. That's the heavyweight champ. You were here. Everyone else was here. But since then, the feeling has been Joshua makes all this money fighting anyway, 30 million pounds, whatever it is. Why should he take 40 or 50 to fight Wilder when he's making against anybody? He can make 30, 40 million pounds, whatever it is.
No fantasy contracts, just reality. You know, bringing our worth to the table and bargaining and negotiating what we're worth and making this fight.
What if one of boxing's biggest stars just pulled back the curtain on a shocking behind-the-scenes move? Anthony Joshua drops a bombshell that no one saw coming. A private conversation, a surprising offer, and a name that always stirs controversy: Jake Paul. Was it business, mind games, or something more calculated? Stay with me, because what Joshua reveals raises serious questions about influence, money, and what really happens behind the scenes.
That's why Jake Paul is so relevant, because he's found a way to bypass promoters and make money in the boxing rings instead of being a prisoner to the promoters. Even though he didn't fight anybody, he's about to fight Anthony Joshua, and we'll see what happens with that. Anthony Joshua should knock him into tomorrow because he's the bigger fighter with incredible power, but he's got a glass jaw. So if Jake Paul catches him, who knows?
The moment the story surfaced, it didn't sound like the usual noise that surrounds crossover boxing. This wasn't about trash talk, social media jabs, or manufactured beef. It was about power, money, and an alleged attempt to control the outcome of something that still claims to stand for legitimacy.
Fighting's not just physical, it's psychological. And when you understand the psychological warfare, I did say to you that, Jake, what's going to happen? I'm going to see a time when I'm going to take your soul and you're either going to give up or you're going to get knocked out. And unless you have that instinct, you just will never be a good fighter. So I wish that I could have knocked him out at the start. But as we saw tonight, Jake has spirit.
The boxing world has seen controversy before, but this hit a different nerve because of who was involved and how casually it was revealed. Anthony Joshua has always carried himself with restraint.
There's people out there that are going, Jake deserves credit, this is amazing, he's gone 6 rounds with Anthony Joshua. He hasn't gone 6 rounds with Anthony Joshua, he spent 5 rounds on his bloody bike, and the other diving for cover. Come on, let's get real about what happened last night. The dude basically used the greedy to hoodwink the stupid. Fair play to the kid, man. He made 50 million plus. I mean, someone's just sent me a message saying that they did 90 million. Respect. There's people out there saying, oh, he kept getting dropped multiple times and getting up. No, he didn't. Stop lying.
He chooses words carefully, rarely drifts into public drama, and understands the weight his reputation holds. That's why when details began circulating about a private interaction involving Jake Paul, people listened differently.
AJ, do you think Jake is on your level whatsoever?
No.
No, okay.
Respectfully. Because it's clear. If I say yes, I'm going to be lying to myself, and I can't lie to myself. It's not that he can't compete,
right?
But when you talk about, for example, music, how many albums I've put out, how many mixtapes I've put out, he just hasn't got the body of work I've got in boxing.
Got you.
This wasn't a rival exaggerating a story to gain leverage. This was a heavyweight champion describing a situation that challenged the credibility of modern boxing narratives. The context matters. Jake Paul has built his boxing identity on spectacle, business sense, and the ability to bend attention in his favor. He markets fights as events rather than sporting contests, blurring lines between entertainment and competition. That approach has earned him massive visibility and financial success. But it has also raised persistent questions about authenticity. Those questions intensified the moment this story entered the public space. According to the account that spread rapidly, the interaction wasn't framed as a joke or a misunderstanding. It was presented as a serious proposal, one that suggested outcomes could be influenced behind closed doors. The idea wasn't subtle. It revolved around shaping a fight in a way that benefited branding, narrative, and long-term profit rather than sporting integrity. That implication alone was enough to unsettle fans, fighters, and promoters. What made it more unsettling was the platform on which the revelation gained traction. When discussions like this surface in controlled press environments, they're often dismissed as calculated leaks.
Or Jake would have moved around the ring at 100 miles an hour. There's 2 things I would have done. Tried to shut Jake down at 100 miles an hour, or I would have gone on the back foot. So Jake decided to move around the ring, and I decided to put the pressure on. What I could have done better is a lot of things, 100%. In the fight game, you've seen the amazing fighters that have graced us over the last 100 years, and the expectations that we put on ourselves are.
But this emerged in a setting known for long-form, unfiltered conversation, where performers tend to drop their guard. The tone wasn't theatrical. It came across as matter-of-fact, almost reluctant, as if the information had been sitting unresolved for some time. The suggestion that a fight involving Anthony Joshua could be scripted crosses a psychological line. Joshua represents the traditional boxing structure, characterized by sanctioned belts, elite competition, and a career built through grueling progression. The idea that someone would approach him with an offer to prearrange elements of a fight speaks volumes about how some perceive modern boxing stars. It suggests a belief that legacy can be negotiated the same way marketing deals are. This is where the reaction split sharply. Supporters of crossover boxing tried to downplay the seriousness, framing it as miscommunication or strategic talk taken out of context. But critics saw it as confirmation of long-held suspicions. To them, this wasn't an isolated incident, it was part of a broader pattern where spectacle threatens to overpower the sport itself. Anthony Joshua's response to the alleged proposal is what gave the story weight. There was no indication of temptation or negotiation. The stance was firm, almost dismissive. It reinforced the idea that there are still clear boundaries some fighters refuse to cross, regardless of money or exposure. That refusal became the silent centerpiece of the story, even more than the accusation itself.
Suing Anthony Joshua. And the reason has everybody side-eyeing this whole situation. From what's being said, Jake is claiming Anthony Joshua went off script. And when I say off script, I mean there was supposedly a no knockout clause, or at least very specific fight rules, and Joshua hitting Jake so hard that his jaw got dislocated in 2 places was not part of that agreement. Jake's basically saying that punch crossed the line from just boxing into what he's calling malicious intent. Now,
from Jake Paul's perspective, the silence or deflection that followed only intensified scrutiny. In an era where instant rebuttals are common, the absence of a direct, detailed denial allowed speculation to grow. Fans dissected timelines, past interviews, and promotional patterns, searching for alignment with the claims. Every previous fight, every controversial moment was re-examined through this new lens. On one side are fighters who view the sport as a test of skill, endurance, and personal honor. On the other hand are figures who see boxing primarily as a content vehicle, where outcomes are secondary to engagement metrics. When these worlds collide, tension is inevitable. The alleged bribe wasn't just about money. It was about control. Control over narrative, over public perception, and over the direction of a career. Accepting such an offer would mean surrendering a degree of agency that fighters like Joshua have fought years to earn. That's why the story resonated beyond gossip. It became a referendum on what boxing is becoming.
Jake Paul gets knocked out predictably by Anthony Joshua in tonight's fight. Now, I am torn on this fight. When it first started and Joshua was giving it, I'm thinking, oh, here we go again. It's the Tyson fight again. We're talking about 2 fighters who are pretending. It looked like a Rocky fight at the start. Joshua was afraid to let go. He was just like tapping. Let Jake get a few punches and everything. And then I'm thinking, hang on, I'm torn between 2 ways.
As the discussion spread, other fighters and analysts weighed in indirectly. Some spoke about the importance of protecting the sport's credibility. Others hinted at experiences that suggested similar approaches are more common than fans realize. Even without naming names, the implication was clear. This wasn't an unimaginable scenario. The involvement of major media platforms added another layer. When stories like this intersect with established sports networks, it forces a reckoning. Networks rely on both traditional champions and crossover stars to drive viewership. Balancing those interests becomes more, but for what they stood for when tested. Jake Paul's brand, built on disruption, thrives on controversy. But there's a difference between challenging norms and undermining trust. If fans begin to believe outcomes are negotiable, the entire structure loses meaning. Pay-per-view numbers might spike temporarily, but long-term credibility erodes. The timing of the revelation also matters. Boxing is already under pressure from competing entertainment options and shifting audience expectations. Trust is a fragile commodity. Once lost, it's difficult to rebuild. Stories like this accelerate skepticism, especially among purists who already feel alienated by spectacle-driven events.
Messy. If Jake is really saying this fight was supposed to follow a script, then what does that say about the event, the Vegas crowd, the betting money, all of that? Because that opens up a whole different conversation nobody wants to touch. He's allegedly claiming Anthony Joshua could be on the hook for something like $20 million for violating the rules and going beyond what was agreed upon. But let's be real for a second. This is boxing. People get hit. Jaws get broken. That's literally the risk you take stepping into the ring.
There's also a psychological element at play. Fighters operate in a world where respect is currency. An approach that implies willingness to manipulate outcomes can be perceived as deeply disrespectful, regardless of intent. It suggests a lack of belief in the fighter's competitiveness or principles. As weeks passed, the story didn't disappear. It evolved. Clips were analyzed, commentary expanded, and discussions moved from fan forums to mainstream debate. Whether every detail is verifiable became almost secondary. Anthony Joshua didn't frame himself as a whistleblower. There was no sense of crusade. That subtlety is what made the story more believable. It felt less like an attack and more like an explanation of why certain fights never materialized. Sometimes absence tells a story louder than spectacle. The broader implication is unavoidable. Boxing is at a crossroads. It can continue blending entertainment with competition, or it can reassert principles that distinguish sport from performance. Incidents like this force stakeholders to choose whether they want to or not.
Have a section where the two parties are going to meet, talk, discuss, have this. Just watch this video.
And mentally.
It's already written.
Where?
In the history books, brother.
In yours, not mine.
No, it is.
Not
You'll
mine.
see. There's only one God, and God wrote it.
You see with Jake, what I learned about Jake is he's a mental person. This is my observation. Not only the physical aspects of training, but the way he thinks, meditation, breath work. If I can break his soul and I can break his mentality, then I've broken Jake.
As attention shifts to future matchups and promotional strategies, the memory of this revelation lingers. It becomes part of the background noise that shapes expectations. Fighters will be asked different questions. Fans will watch with sharper skepticism. Promoters will tread more carefully, at least in public. That crack in the facade continued to widen as more observers began connecting dots that previously felt unrelated. Decisions that once seemed like simple business moves started to look more calculated. Matchups that were promoted as competitive suddenly felt overly curated. The industry has always balanced commerce and competition, but this moment exposed how fragile that balance has become when one side dominates unchecked. What unsettled many insiders wasn't just the allegation itself, but how believable it sounded within the current landscape. This time, responses were cautious, measured, and often indirect. That restraint suggested discomfort rather than confidence. It hinted at an industry aware of its vulnerabilities, unsure whether pushing back would expose more than it concealed. Anthony Joshua's role in this story continued to evolve even without further statements. His refusal to engage in sensational follow-ups reinforced the perception that this wasn't about attention. It was about drawing a boundary and moving on. In doing so, he forced others to confront questions they'd rather avoid. If someone of his stature wasn't willing to play along, what did that say about the offers being made elsewhere?
Was he carrying Jake Paul? Was he carrying Jake Paul because of the script with the mentality of knocking him out before time? Or was Joshua not wanting to potentially hurt this guy? Like, hurt him. Like, he was throwing single punches, sometimes the odd one or twos. You know what I mean? The first 4 rounds, you're talking like 8 punches to 5 punches. And it was like, I was thinking now, there's some sort of script in.
The ripple effects extended beyond boxing circles. Sponsors, broadcasters, and investors pay close attention to credibility. They understand that while controversy can generate short-term buzz, sustained doubt undermines long-term value. When fans question whether outcomes are genuine, engagement shifts from emotional investment to detached consumption. That shift changes everything. Younger fighters watching this unfold absorbed an unspoken lesson. Success in boxing has always required navigating complex politics, but this episode highlighted the importance of choosing alignment carefully. Not every lucrative opportunity strengthens a career. Some erode it quietly, leaving reputations compromised long after the money is spent. The crossover boxing model itself came under renewed scrutiny. While it has undeniably brought new audiences to the sport each time, the sport adapted, often painfully. What makes this moment different is the speed at which narratives spread and solidify. There's little room for quiet resolution when every development is dissected in real time. The alleged attempt to influence Anthony Joshua didn't just challenge individual ethics, it challenged the audience's trust. Fans want to believe that when two fighters step into the ring, the outcome is uncertain. That uncertainty is the soul of competition. Remove it, and what remains is performance without stakes.
The Jake Paul fight script just got leaked and the details are absolutely insane. This script goes back to the initial promotion where he was supposed to fight a super underweight Gervonta Davis. But we now learn this fight was never supposed to happen. The plan was always to fight Anthony Joshua, but they started with a villain arc by positioning him against someone 70 pounds lighter. So when he goes to fight someone heavier instead, he looks like a hero underdog instead of the initial side. That's just the beginning. The script for the actual fight is set up for it to go the distance and Paul to be awarded the win by decision. As a result,
this episode also underscored the power imbalance between established champions and promotional disruptors. Even fighters with global recognition aren't immune to pressure when massive platforms and capital are involved. Resisting that pressure requires not just principle, but leverage. Joshua had both. Others may not be as fortunate. As time passes, the immediate shock fades, but the underlying questions remain unresolved. How many similar conversations never reach the public? How often are boundaries tested quietly, with different results? The absence of answers fuels speculation, and speculation fills the void left by transparency. What's clear is that this wasn't an isolated spark. It was a signal flare illuminating tensions that have been building for years. Boxing stands at a point where choices made now will shape its identity for the next generation. Whether it leans further into spectacle or recommits to competitive integrity will determine how stories like this are remembered. Anthony Joshua's exposure of the situation didn't provide closure because closure would imply resolution. Instead, it delivered clarity, which is far more disruptive. This clarity forces an uncomfortable reality into the open, one that can no longer be dismissed as speculation or cynicism.